Number one, you need to be thinking about before you become self-employed, before you start your own business, before you become an entrepreneur, you need to be thinking about how you handle your money. Probably heard before that as an entrepreneur, you need to be good with your money. And this is 100% true. That's because things are going to come up. You can't plan for what all is potentially going to come up. Anything can happen. I guess that's another way of saying it. It's like you need to be really, really good at making sure you budget your money and make sure you're not overspending for things, and make sure that you are putting up for what could potentially come up. And again, nobody can guess what's gonna come up. Nobody really knows what enough is. You can think you got enough put away, and then something unexpected could come up. So especially in your early days of starting your own business and becoming self-employed, buying your own truck, whatever it is that you're going to do, you want to be extra liberal on making sure you save money and handle your money correctly, making sure you put up money for your taxes, making sure you put up money for your overhead, making sure you put up money for your capital expenditures, things that are going to come up, not necessarily every month, but they're going to come up every year, every 2 years, and they're probably going to be pretty expensive when they do come up. These are the things you want to make sure that you are properly preparing for. Next thing to consider before you start your own business, before you become self-employed, is your perception, your perspective on insurance. As a young person coming up, I always had the mindset dealing with insurance of having the minimum. When it came to my car specifically, like whatever it is, I want the minimum amount of insurance. And I guess, while I do understand that mindset, as a business owner, you can't afford to just be operating off of minimum insurance. You need to have the proper insurance to protect you from everything that could potentially come up. You want to be good with your money. You want to make sure you handle your money correctly. But again, there's still going to be things that come up that you can't handle, that you didn't plan for. And in those cases, you want to be properly insured. And when you're thinking about insurance, I don't want you to just think about the actual paperwork, the policy, the insurance. I want you to think about insurance from a holistic perspective. Like insurance is hedging yourself against what could happen. So think about insuring yourself in that fashion, not just insurance as a product, but like where can I make sure I'm covered at? Where can I limit my exposure at? That's the way you want to be thinking as a business owner, because again, potentially anything could come up, and successful business owners are the individuals that are the most forward thinking. Another thing to consider before you start working for yourself, before you start driving your own truck, is your work habit. You should be willing to work harder for yourself than you do for others. However, a lot of people get started working for themselves with the idea of, I'm tired of working so hard. I want to have the option to work less. And while I get that mindset, the reality is to cover yourself, to make sure that you're prepared, or properly preparing yourself for everything that could potentially come up. You're gonna have to work. You're definitely going to have to work. You're going to have to work to build your network. You're going to have to work to build your resources. You're going to have to work to build your accounts receivable, the money that's coming in. You're going to have to work to build your savings. You're going to have to work to build everything. Again, especially in the early days. What that boils down to basically is you got to be willing to take your work home with you. I know a lot of people will say that that's not the right thing to do. You don't want to take your work home with you, but specifically in the early days of getting yourself stable as an entrepreneur, as a self-employed individual, when everybody else is done working, you're still going to have to do things. That's just a reality. So you got to be willing to work. You got to be willing to put it out there. You got to be willing to, what I call, get your hands dirty, at least for a while, at least for the first 3 to 5 years, maybe even 7 years, depends on how long it takes you to get your business up and running. You got to be willing to do that in order to get things stable. Another thing to consider, once you get into business for yourself, and this is one of those things that puts people out of business, is not knowing your numbers. This is definitely applicable to individuals that drive trucks, that are self-employed truck drivers, because it's very expensive to maintain, to operate a truck. But this also applies to individuals in any pretty much in any line of business. If you're going from working for someone else where you don't have any overhead, where you don't have any money that you got to put back into what you're doing, and you start working for yourself, for some people that can be a little bit of a transition. Now you have to put money back into your business, and you need to know what it costs you to operate your business so that you can properly prepare for the bills that are going to come up. As a truck driver, I definitely want to keep on top of what it's costing me to run my truck per mile, what my truck is making per mile on every run that I do, but I do the same run every night. So I want to keep up with what my truck is making per mile every night. And I also want to keep up with my fuel costs specifically, not just overall what it's costing me to run my truck. I want to keep up with that number, as I mentioned already, but I definitely want to keep an eye on what it's costing me to run my truck specifically as fuel costs. Fuel costs is one of those things where if you keep your eyes on it, it can give you insight into how you're driving your truck. Like you can drive your truck in a certain way and spend a lot more fuel doing the same 300 miles versus if you drove it the right way. Put the truck on cruise control when it's appropriate. Make sure you're not braking excessively. Make sure you're not aggressively accelerating, stuff like that. So I watch my fuel costs every night, even though I'm running the same amount of miles every night. And sometimes there's a $30, maybe even a $50 or $60 difference in how much it's costing me just in fuel to run my truck. So I want to keep an eye on fuel costs, especially with fuel being super expensive right now. You got to sit down literally every night. For me, I do it like every load. Okay, for some truck drivers, they do it every load, but you at least got to be willing to do it every night. Sit down and figure up your cost of operation and what you earning, and like any numbers that are specific to your business. You need to know those. You need to keep on top of those. That makes it easy if you ever want to transition out of actually operating your business. You're an owner operator because you own and operate. You're involved in the day-to-day operation of your business, driving a truck. But if you ever want to stop driving your truck and you want to put somebody else in it, or you ever want to stop operating or working in your business and you want to put somebody else in it, the numbers of what that individual needs to, of what it costs you to operate your business, with now having to pay someone, you need to already be used to running that budget, essentially. I hope you understand what I'm saying with that. A lot of owner operators don't take a check, and then they find it hard to transition out of operating their business because now you want to put somebody else in. Now you got to factor in the true cost of operating your business, and because you never did that before, it seems like you can't afford to do that. So you definitely want to know all of those numbers. Again, it's going to make it easier for you to transition out of the operational phase of your business. It's going to allow you to operate your business more efficiently. And if you ever decide to sell your business, this is something that you're going to want to have. You're going to want to have anyway, if you ever want to sell it or you want to pass it down to someone. Another thing you want to be doing as a new business owner, I kind of touched on this earlier, is making sure you're stacking your money. Again, you can't, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what enough is. A lot of us think we have enough until the unexpected comes, and then we realize that we didn't have enough. So you got to be super aggressive at stacking your money, which means you got to be good at budgeting, which means you got to know how much you're spending. You can't hold on to any money if you're not paying attention to what's going out and where it's going to. So you want to be super proficient on budgeting. You want to know where all your dollars are so that you can make sure that you're stacking money. You're accumulating money to put back into your business, to invest, to save, to grow your wealth, whatever it may be. Kind of goes back to being good with your money. Another thing to consider for individuals that are about to be self-employed or just became self-employed or just bought their own truck, you're probably going to be making more money now overall grossing than what you made as an employee. So it's important to not spend more money. Many of us get caught up in what is called lifestyle creep. As we earn more money, we tend to spend more money. And that, in my opinion, is a result of not giving your dollars a job. Every dollar that comes in, you need to allot it for something, towards something, give it a job. If you don't, it'll just seep right out of your bank account. You don't want to be signing on to any long-term obligations as you're making money. A lot of people do that. Now they want to go and finance a car, or they want to go and finance something else that is really more or less along the lines of a consumer item and they can afford to pay for that consumer item, maybe, as long as the money is coming in. But in business, you can never plan for what's going to come up. So as soon as something comes up with their income, as soon as one of their accounts goes away, as soon as there's a dip in prices or in rates or something along those lines, and their profit margin is cut or they're making less money, now they're having a problem honoring these long-term obligations and these long-term contracts that they signed on for when they were making good money. Again, you can't guess, you can't predict what is all of what's gonna come up. So again, you want to be ultra conservative in where you're spending your money, especially your early days, because that adds to lifestyle creep. You want to do everything you can to keep your expenses way below what you're making. That is the only way you're gonna be able to save and accumulate anything. Another thing to consider that most self-employed individuals, business owners, I know I didn't consider it for a long time, is the idea that you yourself as the business owner, you need to be getting better. You have to find a way to get better, to become more valuable, essentially. No business can go any further than the mindset of the individual that's running that business. So this is kind of more or less, like a spiritual thing. In my opinion, that's how it works. As I get better, get more valuable, gain more knowledge, become more efficient in my line of work and in doing what I'm doing, somehow, some way, my business just grows along with me. And when I'm not doing those things, I find that my business stagnates. And when business is stagnant, sometimes we'll do things to work on our business, but the key might be you need to work on yourself, because both of those things affect how your business is responding. Another thing to consider specifically for people that are about to buy their own truck and become a self-employed truck driver. This is something my dad says to me all the time, just to make sure I understand. He keeps saying to me, 50,000 ain't no money, son. I'm just letting you know, 50,000 ain't really no money. 25,000 ain't really no money. 75,000, 100,000 in trucking is not much money, because it's super expensive to own and operate a truck. So for many people, when they come into driving their own truck, you may be in a position where you're making more money than you ever made before. You may be in a position where you're accumulating more money than you're able to accumulate before. As you start to look at your bank account and see, more zeros than you've seen before, whatever that is relative to you in your own personal situation. Some people ain't never seen 10,000 in an account before. Some people have seen 10,000 in their account before, but ain't never seen 100,000 in their account before. But the point is, like in trucking, it's a lot of money to own and operate a truck. Whatever line of business you're in, it's probably going to be a lot of money to own and operate that business, right? So, like, the point is, whatever you're not used to looking at that's now showing up in your bank account, that's not any money. Like, your old ceiling is going to now need to become your new floor. That's the reason why my dad keeps telling me that 50,000 ain't no money, because he don't want me to see a certain amount of zeros in my bank account and get comfortable and stop growing, because he understands that if I get content, then my business will stagnate. So again, kind of goes back to making sure you, the individual, continue to grow your perspective, and continue to grow what you see as possible for your business. Another thing to think about as a new business owner, and this kind of ties into some of the other stuff that I talked about, you got to keep in mind that most of the money that you make as a self-employed individual, a truck driver or whatever, is not yours. And for some people, this is an issue. So just to give you a simplified example, as a self-employed individual, unlike an individual that works for somebody else or drives for somebody else, as a self-employed individual, you're going to pay X amount of percentage of your net profit in taxes. If you make $200,000 and it costs you $100,000 that year to keep that truck on the road between fuel and insurance and all the overhead that you got, you're going to be taxed on the $100,000 of profit that is left. And you could pay 30-35% of that net profit in taxes, which literally means that for every dollar that you make, in that simplified example, only 65 to 70 cents of that dollar is actually yours. The other 30-35% is not yours. It's the tax man's. And this is the same logic that you want to apply to all of your overhead, all of your business expenses, including yourself. As I said earlier, a lot of business owners don't take a check. But I, as a business owner, and I recommend that self-employed business owners do take a check. The money that I pay myself, I actually write my wife a check for the bills that have to get paid at the house. And I don't count that money as mine either. So I look at what has to come off of my gross for taxes. I look at what I pay myself personally. I look at all of my business expenses. And after you do all of that as a business owner, you're probably going to find out that only about 30 to 40 cents, maybe a little bit less, out of every dollar is actually your money. So it's a little bit of a difference than the way the employee thinks about their money. Most employees feel that 100% of what they make is theirs, but for business owners, it's not like that. Which this basically boils down to, if you want to bring home a dollar as a self-employed individual, as a business owner, you got to focus on making like $4 or $5. You can't focus on making a dollar if you want to bring home a dollar. You got to focus on making $4 or $5. That's the responsible way to look at it as the money is coming in your bank account. Another thing to consider, this also kind of ties into some of the stuff that I already touched on. As a new business owner, you're going to have to get used to counting your pennies. If you're not already doing that as an employee, when you start working for yourself, it's going to feel like everybody is out here trying to nickel and dime you. And that's absolutely what is going on. So you want to make sure that you're counting your pennies. You're paying attention to the little stuff that's seeping out. You want to make sure, as a truck driver specifically, you check your pay stubs as they come in to make sure you're getting paid for all the little stuff that you're supposed to get paid for. After somebody does work on my truck, I want to make sure I inspect the work that they do. I don't want to just take their word for it. I want to make sure that I got what I paid for, basically. This is kind of all of what I'm talking about as far as making sure you count your pennies. Make sure that when you put a dollar out, when you spend it, you get what you spent the money for. Making sure you don't spend money unnecessarily, and making sure that people don't just nickel and dime you. Those pennies add up. Like, in a very literal sense, every day when I come home, when me and my wife come home, we take the change out of our pocket. Most of you guys probably do this. If you're not, you need to. And we put it in a jar. And we do that every day, every month, every week. And at the end of the year, every year, we accumulate enough money in the change jar to have Christmas, to buy Christmas gifts, or to take a vacation sometimes. I mean, like, we've put, as much as $1,500, $2,000 we've accumulated just by literally watching our pennies. So you got to make sure you pay attention to those pennies. They do add up. And if you're not paying attention to them at the end of the year, you'll be like, where did all my pennies go? Another thing that I always tell new business owners to put extra emphasis on, I can't overemphasize this enough, is you need to be building your network. When you're in business for yourself, in a lot of cases, you're going to find it's not necessarily what you yourself can get done. There's a lot of people that can help you and that will help you. And so, like, if you think you ever want to own your own business and work for yourself, you want to start now accumulating a network, building a network. The individuals that are going in your network don't need to know. They don't have to formally go into your network. You don't got to go around to people being like, you want to be part of my network? Just anybody helpful that you run across, if the opportunity presents itself, make sure you get their number. I can't tell you how many people I've run across in my trucking career that were willing to help me. I didn't get their contact information, and I found myself needing to talk to them or to find out something that they may know in the future. And then it's like, man, I was talking to a guy that could help me out with that, but I didn't get his phone number, and I don't know if he works at that place anymore, or I don't go to that place anymore. You want to be actively building your network. This is something you always want to be doing, because again, you never know what's going to come up and what resource you're going to need. When you're in business for yourself, your network absolutely impacts your net worth. And the last thing I want to address in this video that I feel new business owners need to understand is you need to love learning. As a business owner, we all got to start from somewhere. In a general sense, most of us don't have, when we start, what we need to have in order to complete what we're trying to complete. Most of us are building it along the way. And so that requires an individual that's constantly willing to, as I spoke about earlier, get better and continue to grow your knowledge and continue to learn. And many of us, when we finished high school, when we got out of school, we stopped learning. We stopped reading books. We stopped taking in information from outside sources. This impacts what ideas are available to you. As you plug yourself into other people, into other resources, into other information sources, you'll notice that ideas tend to flow more freely to you. And this is what business ownership is about. It's about creative ideas, figuring out a way to adapt and stay in the lane or stay wherever you're trying to stay in your business. So essentially what I'm saying with this tip is you have to love learning as a business owner if you want to be able to have some long-term success. And that's the only type of success that there is. There is no short-term success as a business owner. This is why you need to love what you're doing, what business you're going to get into. If you love what you're doing and you're continually learning and expanding your knowledge of what you're doing and how to do it better, then you're always making yourself more valuable to someone in a general sense. So
Maurice Bay, the Helpful Trucker here. For more helpful CDL tips, go here or consider subscribing to my YouTube channel right here. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but instead you chose to be here with me, and I really appreciate that.